My mother was the Queen for a very long time. And although you kind of know that this might happen, you don't really think about it very much. Not least of all because the monarchy is about continuity. But I think for my brother, this is something he's been waiting for.
Queen Elizabeth II left a legacy that would forever be remembered. While her reign and impact are well known, little attention has been given to the events leading to her final moment. In this video, we'll explore 20 intriguing details about the Queen's final days. A glimpse into the moments that defined the last chapters of her life. What were these remarkable moments? Join us as we unveil the untold events before the Queen's passing. Declining health. In the months leading to her death, Queen Elizabeth II faced a noticeable health decline. In October 2021, she began using a walking stick for the first time at a major public event during the Westminster Abbey service. Weeks later, she cancelled her schedule and spent the night in the hospital to undergo some medical tests. But that wasn't all, as she also missed Remembrance Day at Cenotaph due to back sprain. In February 2022, the Queen also tested positive for COVID-19, despite receiving her jabs and a booster vaccine. This news shocked the world. By March 2022, due to her declining health, she missed the state opening of Parliament. It became evident that the Queen was unwell as her public appearance became increasingly rare. But that's not all. Stay tuned as we reveal more about the Queen's final days. Devotion to service. Despite her declining health, Queen Elizabeth II demonstrated a strong commitment to her duties. Just 2 days before her passing, she appointed Liz Truss as the 15th Prime Minister at Balmoral Castle. Interestingly, a day before her death, Queen Elizabeth II issued a condolence statement to victims of a tragic mass stabbing in Saskatchewan, Canada. This turned out to be the Queen's final public statement. But that was not all, as the Queen was scheduled for an online Privy Council meeting, which was later cancelled on medical advice, with plans to reschedule. Until her last breath, the Queen showed utmost devotion to her role as monarch. Heartbroken widow. On April 9, 2021, Prince Philip died, leaving behind his wife, Queen Elizabeth II. The Queen was devastated by the loss of her husband, describing it as a huge void in her life. Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth had been married for 73 years, sharing a long, sweet marriage. Hence, the loss had a profound effect on her. Many believe the death of Prince Philip contributed to the Queen's declining health, and a year later, in September 2022, Queen Elizabeth II joined him in death. After the Queen's passing, Prince Philip's coffin was moved from the royal vault to the King George VI Memorial Chapel in Windsor, where he was buried next to his lovely wife. Final days at Balmoral. In her final days, Queen Elizabeth II spent most of her time at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. Balmoral was one of the Queen's favorite places, as she and Prince Philip had spent part of their honeymoon at Birkhall, a hunting lodge on the estate. Surprisingly, despite the Queen's health challenges, she remained active and was described as rather perky by her close relations and friends. Just 4 days before her passing, the Queen invited her cousins over for a shooting party and a formal dinner. Surprisingly, the dinner broke tradition, as the men didn't wear ties, the women didn't wear long gowns, and there were no bagpipes played. The Queen also developed a liking for BBC weatherman Tomasz Schafernaker, as she never missed his forecast. One of the Queen's memorable events in her final days was her last ride on her pony. Her stud groom, Terry Pendry, recalled the Queen completing 4 laps before retiring for the day, living her final days with joy. Queen Elizabeth's last public engagement. 2 days before her death, Queen Elizabeth II broke tradition again with her last public engagement. she appointed Liz Truss as the UK's new Prime Minister at Balmoral Castle, instead of Buckingham Palace, as she was still dealing with her health issues. This event was the Queen's final public appearance, and the last time she was seen by the public. Prime Minister Truss later revealed that after her appointment, the Queen asked that they meet the following week. However, this never happened. But that's not all. Stay tuned as we uncover more inspiring details about Queen Elizabeth's final days. Queen Elizabeth's last dinner. The Queen's last dinner before her passing was filled with lots of happy moments, with lots of close friends and family in attendance at the Balmoral Castle. The gathering was filled with stories of the Queen's experience with various prime ministers. The Queen was also reported to be quite buzzy over pre-dinner drinks. However, as the evening progressed, she excused herself and said she was going upstairs to have dinner alone. Little did they know this would be the last time they'd all have dinner together. Loved ones surround the Queen. As the Queen's last days drew near, her children, grandchildren, and extended family gathered at Balmoral Castle to be by her side, ensuring she was surrounded by love. Although the Duke of Sussex and his family were absent, other family members spent time with her, checking on her daily and filling her in on the happenings of the UK. However, a day before her passing, Princess Anne and Prince Charles stayed with her throughout as she remained in bed all day long, bedridden and slipping in and out of consciousness. However, she was surrounded by her loved ones until her last breath. Public prayers. The public caught news of family members arriving at Balmoral Castle. This made a lot of people rush to the castle gates to light candles and leave flowers and tributes in honor of the Queen as they waited to hear the news on the Queen. Many citizens expressed hope for her recovery, while others feared she was dead. Meanwhile, as all these were happening, a rainbow appeared in the sky, with many believing that it was a good sign of hope. But what happened next was unexpected. Health deterioration. Despite the prayers of the public and the appearance of the rainbow in the sky, the Queen's health continued to decline. On September 7th, the Queen remained in bed all day and was said to be bedridden, although still alive. Prince Charles, Camilla, and the Duchess of Cornwall arrived at the palace the next morning. The prince spent an hour with his mother and left to attend other engagements. However, a few hours later, at exactly 3:10 p.m. on September 8th, Queen Elizabeth died. Dr. Douglas Glass, her official apothecary in Scotland, pronounced the cause of death as old age. The Queen's death sent shockwaves around the world, marking the end of an era. London Bridge is down protocol. Immediately after the Queen's death, the British protocol codenamed London Bridge is Down was initiated. The process began with notifying the royal family first, as they began to arrive at the Balmoral Castle. Interestingly, Prince Harry was around, but his wife was absent. Next to be notified was the Queen's private secretary and Prime Minister, Liz Truss. Within 10 minutes of government officials being notified, the castle flags were lowered at half-mast. The news was then communicated to governments of the Commonwealth of Nations and the 14 other countries where Elizabeth was Queen. Buckingham Palace also made a TV announcement. But that's not all, as the royal staff attached a notice to the palace gates, informing the people of the Queen's death. The 8th of October, 2022, was a dark day for the United Kingdom and the world, as everyone mourned Queen Elizabeth II. However, while mourning continued, the nation's focus soon shifted to what lay ahead now that the Queen was dead. Public reaction. There was a large number of people in front of the palace, watching and waiting anxiously for news. As they saw the flags lowered to half-mast, they knew something was wrong. The official announcement by Buckingham Palace on the Queen's demise led to an outburst of grief. more people gathered at the palace gates, sobbing about the loss of the beloved queen. More candles were lit in front of the palace, and heartfelt notes and flowers were also left at the gates of Buckingham Palace. Hundreds of people also streamed through nearby Green Park on their way to pay tribute at the royal residence. All the royal palaces in the UK were adorned with flowers. Now the rainbow in the sky made more meaning, as it was seen as a sign of the Queen's demise. Stay tuned as we discover what lies ahead with the Queen's demise. Operation Unicorn. Following the Queen's demise, Operation Unicorn was initiated as the Queen died at Balmoral. Operation Unicorn indicated the detailed arrangements to be followed when the Queen passed away in Scotland. However, due to the late timing of her death, Operation Unicorn was implemented on the 9th of September. The Queen's casket was covered in Scottish royal standard, with a wreath of flowers placed at the top, as it was taken by road 2 days after the Queen's death to rest temporarily at the Palace of Holyrood House. The casket was accompanied by Princess Anne and Sir Timothy Lawrence, with large crowds along the route, watching and paying their last respects. The following day, the Queen's casket was moved to St. Giles Cathedral for a royal Thanksgiving service. It laid in state for 14 hours for the public to pay their respects. About 3,300 people came to pay their final respects to the late Queen Elizabeth II. On the 13th of September, her coffin left Edinburgh and Scotland for the final time, and was flown down to London, where the Queen continued her farewell journey. Lying in state. As part of the London Bridges Down protocol, the Queen's casket was laid in state at Westminster Hall in London from September the 14th to 19th. But before this, upon the arrival of the casket, there was a change in the Scottish royal standard, covering a non-Scottish version. The Big Ben tolled, and the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery fired their guns as the casket was placed within the Westminster Hall. Lots of security guarded the Queen's casket, as the hall was opened for the public to pay their respects to the late Queen from September 14th to September 19th. The public flocked around to pay their last respect, forming long queues that covered 10 miles. To make the process easy, 2 separate queues operated, one for people with disabilities and the other for general mourners. However, on the 16th of September, both queues were at full capacity, and arriving mourners were directed to a holding pen in Southwark Park, referred to in one press headline as a queue for the queue. During the Queen's lying in state, appropriately, 25,000 people queued to pay their respects, including celebrities. She was indeed a monarch who had affected lives positively. Wondering what happens next? Let's find out. State funeral arrangements. The Queen's funeral arrangement was next. This was quite easy, as plans for the Queen's death had existed since the 1960s. Interestingly, the Queen was also consulted about all the details included in her funeral plan during her lifetime. Let's find out the details of the funeral. The Earl Marshal was in charge of conducting the event, while the Foreign Office handled the invitation, communication, and security arrangements for the funeral. Invitations were sent to 500 foreign dignitaries, including heads of state and diplomats from nations maintaining relations with the UK. However, Russia, Belarus, Afghanistan, Myanmar, Venezuela, and Syria were excluded. To handle the Queen's funeral arrangement, 300 staff were also redeployed to handle different activities and ensure a smooth funeral event. September 19, 2022 was declared a public holiday to mark the Queen's funeral. Businesses, educational establishments, banks, and supermarkets closed. Takeoffs and landings at Heathrow Airport were rescheduled to maintain silence during the services in Westminster and Windsor, and the processions in between. The streets of London were also kept clean as Westminster City Council deployed its Clean Streets team to clean up different areas within central London. Everything was set for the final farewell. Queen Elizabeth II funeral service. On September 19, 2022 at 10:44, Queen Elizabeth's coffin was moved from Westminster Hall to Westminster Abbey on the state gun carriage of the Royal Navy. Members of the royal family walked behind the Queen's casket, and by 10:52, the coffin arrived at Westminster Abbey for the funeral. However, before the service began, the tenor bell of the Abbey rang once a minute for 96 minutes, once for each year of the Queen's life. At 11 a.m., the funeral service began, conducted by David Hoyle, the Dean of Westminster.
And also, in profound thanksgiving, we come to this house of God.
He conducted the service according to the 1662 Book of Common Prayer. Readings were delivered by Baroness Scotland, Secretary General of the Commonwealth, and Liz Truss, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, followed by a sermon shortly by Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, and prayers by different clergy from several Christian denominations. The service also featured music including Like as the Heart by Judith Weir, and the anthem Who Shall Separate Us by James Macmillan, both written for the funeral. As the funeral service drew to a close, a 2-minute silence and the bagpipe lament, Sleep, Dearie, Sleep, marked the end of the funeral service. The Queen's coffin was then carried out of the church as they proceeded to the next phase of her journey. Procession to Wellington Arch. The procession session followed swiftly after the funeral service at 12:15. It involved 3,000 military personnel from the Abbey and traversed Whitehall, through Horse Guards, up the Mall, past Buckingham Palace, and up Constitution Hill to end at the Wellington Arch at Hyde Park Corner. Leading the procession to the Wellington Arch were representatives of Commonwealth forces, including members of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police on horseback, then representatives of the Royal Air Force, the British Army, and the Royal Navy and Royal Marines, along with defense staff, armed forces chaplains, officers of arms, and the royal household who followed behind as the military bands played funeral marches. Big Ben tolled each minute, and minute guns were fired from Hyde Park by the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery. Upon reaching the Wellington Arch, the Queen's coffin was transferred with a royal salute to the state hearse for the journey to Windsor. Thousands of citizens gathered to witness this historic event, including the Queen's pony, Emma, and her beloved corgis, Mook and Sandy, stood at the side of the procession. The King and the royal family joined the procession in the quadrangle, where the bells tolled and minute guns fired. This marked the end of the procession as the Queen's coffin was taken to St. George's Chapel via the West Steps for the Queen's next journey. What happened next? Stay with us to find out. Committal service. At 4 p.m., the committal service commenced at St. George's Chapel in Windsor, with 800 guests in attendance. Majorly the royal household, staff from the Queen's private estates, governors general, prime ministers from the Commonwealth realms, and members of foreign royal houses were in the chapel. The service began with the choir singing the Russian Kontakion of the Departed, which was also sung at the funeral of Prince Philip. The Dean of Windsor, David Connor, conducted the service and read the bidding, commendation, and the reading. The Bible reading was from Revelation 21. This was the same reading read during the funerals of Elizabeth's grandparents and father. As the committal service was been concluded, the imperial state crown, orb, and scepter were removed from the coffin and placed on the altar. King Charles III took the Queen's company. Camp color of the Grenadier Guards on his mother's coffin before the Lord Chamberlain symbolically broke his wand of office and also placed its halves atop the coffin. This marked the end of Queen Elizabeth II's formal service. Following this, a salute to the royal fendersmith was played by the sovereign's piper, as the Queen's coffin was lowered into the royal vault. The service, however, ended with the national anthem, but this wasn't the end of the Queen's farewell service. Queen Elizabeth's burial. After the completion of the funeral service, the Queen was buried later that evening at 7:30 p.m. in a private ceremony with only her closest family in attendance. She was interred in George VI Memorial Chapel in an English oak, lead-lined coffin that was constructed more than 30 years ago. Queen Elizabeth II was buried beside her family, her father, King George VI, her mother, Queen Elizabeth, and the ashes of her sister, Princess Margaret. One memorable moment that happened during the Queen's burial was moving the remains of her late husband, Prince Philip, from the royal vault, where he was temporarily buried, to the George VI Memorial Chapel to rest next to the Queen. This was a fulfillment of the couple's last wish. This marked the final chapter of Queen Elizabeth II's life of service. Now, with the Queen buried, what was next? Stay tuned as we unveil the new chapter of a new monarch, a new ruler. With the death of the Queen at age 96, the new ruler of the United Kingdom passed to Prince Charles, the former Prince of Wales. After his mother's death, there were different speculations on the king's regal name. However, Prime Minister Tusk confirmed that he would be called King Charles III. As the crown passed to Prince Charles as the new ruler, on the evening of September 8, 2022, Buckingham Palace released the king's first official statement as monarch at 1904. In the statement, he said that the Queen's loss will be deeply felt throughout the country, the realms, and the Commonwealth, and by countless people around the world. He also pledged to serve with unswerving devotion, like his mother, and uphold the constitutional principles of the nation at heart. 2 days after the Queen's death, the Accession Council gathered at St. James Palace with about 200 dignitaries in attendance. As the former Prince of Wales, Charles was formally proclaimed the new monarch, King Charles III. At 11 a.m., 21 gun salutes at the Tower of London, Cardiff Castle, Edinburgh Castle, Castle Cornet, Gibraltar, and naval bases and ships at sea marked the accession. Shortly after his ascension, King Charles III stepped outside Buckingham Palace to greet the crowd who were mourning the demise of the Queen. In the following days, he had several meetings with the Prime Minister and other government officials to ensure a smooth leadership process like his mother. Queen Elizabeth's legacy. Queen Elizabeth II was a monarch who led with love, humility, and devotion to her duties. She was the longest ruling monarch in British history, ruling for 70 years. At age 25, her whole life changed from being a young naval wife and mother to a busy head of state following the death of her father in 1952. Despite being young, she grew to become a much-respected figure worldwide who had impacted lives in different ways. Queen Elizabeth II made a lot of significant contributions during her lifetime. She modernized the monarchy, promoted gender equality, allowed daughters to inherit the throne, and strengthened international relationships. For instance, in 2011, when she visited Ireland, she helped in reconciling the Anglo-Irish tension. The Queen was also committed to public service. She supported over 500 charities and raised funds for different causes like health, education, and environmental conservation, among others. However, her reign was also marked by some series of royal family scandals, like the divorce of Prince Charles and Princess Diana, and more recently, the decision by her grandson, Prince Harry, and his wife, Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, to step back as senior members of the royal family and move to the United States. Yet, Queen Elizabeth II would forever be remembered as a resilient and devoted queen who served with all of her heart till her final breath. Reflecting on her journey, Queen Elizabeth II once said all she had been able to do for the world was thanks to her husband, Prince Philip. She described him as her strength and stay throughout the years, and said they, her family, the citizens of the United Kingdom, owed him a greater debt than they would ever claim or ever know. Queen Elizabeth II passed away on September 8, 2022. She's survived by her 4 children, King Charles, Prince Andrew, Prince Edward, and Princess Anne. She also has 4 grandsons, 4 granddaughters, and 12 great-grandchildren. What do you think of the Queen's final 24 hours? Do you think she faced her last moments with grace and dignity? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.